We're back with another season of Best Ball drafting with Occupy Fantasy. This year we partnered up with DraftKings to bring you the exclusive information. Chris, how are we doing today?
Chuck, it's a pleasure to be back with you talking about the National Football League, talking about some of these best ball fantasy drafts, because at the end of the day, right, the way that all of us fell in love with this game that we all love to play was through the snake draft format in our traditional home fantasy leagues. And the exciting thing about best ball is that this gives us the ability to simulate that experience, but also have a chance to prove how much better we are than all of our peers while doing so. So I'm excited to be back. I'm excited to be partnered with DraftKings because they have a really, really awesome set of best ball contests for us to go through and discuss. And let's just kick it off and get into it.
Yeah, and football season will be here soon. If you're drafting early this year, DraftKings Best Ball is the move. If you've never played Best Ball before, it's simple. You draft your fantasy team and that's it. No lineups, no waivers. Your lineup is automatically set with your best player scores each week. Right now, DraftKings is giving all customers can't miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll get another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of $15 million, giving you a second shot to take home a big hit.
If you've been with us before, you know that we usually have a few tools available on occupyfantasy.com to help you navigate the draft lobbies. The first I have on the screen right now, Chuck, it is our ADP tracker. This updates once per day, and it is a 7 day rolling average that we measure. So I think there haven't been a tremendous amount of movements as far as ADP at really any spot on the board here. I haven't really seen any massive news. I know we're recording this on Monday morning here, June 16th. So nothing major yet just this week, but obviously OTAs are here. Training camp's going to be starting real soon. Things are definitely going to be heating up here as far as ADP changes. What are some things that you're kind of monitoring that you're trying to see how they affect the board right now?
Well, I'm mostly just going through the motions right now, drafting what I think is the right structure, and we'll get into that. Just taking certain positions at certain spots in the draft. So I'm not as focused on players right now, but I do want to try to figure out which players could possibly move up in ADP over the next few weeks and which players are likely to drop in ADP by the end of draft season. We can't know with perfect information, but we can make assumptions, and hopefully we'll be on the right side of that more than not.
Yeah. This is a completely free tool. You do not need to be a member of occupyfantasy.com to have access to this, by the way. It's right in our top level menu of the site. And just for example, a player that I was thinking about, the Texans, they signed Nick Chubb. That's going to create some competition for Joe Mixon, Dameon Pierce in this backfield. I guess you've seen a little bit of a violent movement here. His ADP is 173. Last week it was 202. Didn't really have a team at that point, so that's a big reason why he's moving. I think this is where we're going to see the most dramatic changes in general throughout the rest of I guess, the last week of spring and the summer here before we get into football season. Chuck is the bottom of the board.
Yeah, and you'll see a lot of influencers, YouTube shows, and they do definitely have an influence on how ADP is affected. A certain guy is on, this player this week. You'll see him jump a few spots, and every time you're about to start a draft, just open up the ADP tracker and see what's changing every day.
I love this other tool that we have as well, the Stack Seeker. So, kind of a core strategy of playing these large tournament style contests is looking at the playoff matchups for the teams that you are drafting. It has been a very, very good strategy, Chuck, in basically the entire history of best ball contests to make sure that you're correlating your top players with some of their opponents in these playoff weeks. This is very similar to game stacking in daily fantasy sports, which is obviously something that we advocate for week in and week out in those types of fantasy sports contests, Chuck. And best ball is no different. Obviously, we want to get through the regular season, that week 1 through 14 portion, and advance into the playoff weeks. But we got to draft assuming as if we're right and that we're going to be there and give ourselves the best chance to succeed in those playoff weeks. This is really cool because, like the other tool, you obviously see the top ranked players here on the screen right now, but let's say you get into like the 7th, 8th round and you're drafting. I'm just going to pick a player, might go a little higher than that. I think maybe the 5th or 6th round, Jacoby Myers, and it's your first Raider that you've selected. This allows you to see who the Raiders are going to be playing if you want to create some correlations with that player. I know I use this pretty much every single time I draft. I know you do as well, and allows us to have some, I guess, more educated discussions and I guess internal analyses on where we're going with the rest of our drafts while we're doing them, especially the fast drafts, right?
Yeah, and Chris, why is a playoff correlation so important? Because all of the big prizes are in the later rounds. And so we want to have the strongest teams in week 15, 16, 17. 17 is the finals. And so if we can kind of match up certain games that we think is going to, blow up, then we can put ourselves in a really good position to take down the contest.
So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 best ball lineup to play for a share of 15 million and get that second ticket to play free for a share of 15 million. There's two chances to play for a huge score without ever having to set your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. So at this point, I am currently waiting for a fast draft to start in the $15 million millionaire with $2 million to first. This is the flagship contest here on DraftKings this season. We can go through some of the details, Chuck. Basically in the first round, we're just playing to advance, right? We're going to be in 12-man pods. That's the draft group that we are with, and the top two are going to advance to the first week of the postseason. In the second round, just the top team out of 12 advances to round three. Same in round three, the top team advances to the finals. And then we have a fairly large final round here in this tournament because this is the biggest tournament that is being offered at this point. Just over 1,000 contestants will be in the finals here, but a lot of juicy prizes at the top of the leaderboard. So this is obviously the one that everyone's going to be most interested in, I think, especially if you're only drafting a few teams and you want to have a fun exposure to the NFL through fantasy football this year.
Yeah, and if you've been watching our channel, you know that I'm a large field guy. I prefer the large field contests with the biggest prizes, but DraftKings also offers a lot of smaller field contests to fit, whatever your bankroll looks like or whatever you're looking for. And some of those, the $3.20 max, I think is probably one of the best contests out there. Just everyone's only allowed 20 entries. It's a gigantic contest, and I think that's the way to go if you're getting into your first draft. Start with that one. They have some $10 five maxes that are awesome, and those don't last the whole summer. The difference, the millionaire, that's going to be open until the season starts probably. These other smaller contests, we call it time boxed because the
Mm-hmm.
ADPs aren't going to move that drastically from the start of the contest to when it closes. So, we'll get into more about those, which, how to select what you want to play later, but I think it's really good selection over on DraftKings.
Yeah, these you're referring to this play action contest, which is a great, I think, entry level way to get some exposure to building some of these teams, especially if you've never done it before. We might even be able to get into one of these a little bit quicker. Seems like there's a lot more people drafting those at this time because of the dollar amount. It's a little easier to kind of learn the board. I think we're all doing that at this point. Full disclosure, you and I were talking about this before we started the show here. I think we're both kind of just getting started with our best ball portfolio post NFL draft. I know there are some pre-draft contests that we were looking at earlier in the spring, but I've kind of been waiting for some of that OTA news and coming up soon training camp news before I really get super into things this season, right?
Yeah, same. I did a fair amount of drafting in the pre-draft contest, and it's kind of crazy just how much the ADP changes since then. Rookies get drafted to certain teams, but uh, it's a drastic thing, and we'll see that with free agents too. There's a few free agents at the end of the draft who might be value as soon as they get picked up. Their ADP is going to rise, so those are good guys to target.
We are in the millionaire. That one started first, so that's the one we're going to do here. I've got the fourth pick, Chuck. So definitely look forward to discussing a few player takes with you along the way, as well as strategy. On the other site that a lot of people use, there's only 18 rounds. Here on DraftKings, we have 20 rounds, and obviously we have PPR scoring. We have your DraftKings fantasy point bonuses for 300 yards passing, 100 yards receiving, 100 yards rushing. So I do think that alters our strategies a little bit, having a little bit different scoring, having a larger roster. How are you attacking DraftKings contests from like a core roster build perspective? Is there a specific amount of players at each position that you think we should be targeting? Is there any difference in strategy here on DraftKings that you're employing versus the other site that people like to use? Curious your thoughts.
Well, the biggest difference is that bonus, like you mentioned, for the 100 yards for the receivers and the running backs, and then 300 yards passing for the quarterbacks. That 3 points might not sound like much, but it is very important. That 3 points could be the difference between first and fifth place, maybe in week 17. And it's like I haven't done that many drafts post draft yet, but I'm kind of just letting the ADP values dictate who I'm taking where because there's some guys that are falling 10 picks past ADP in the first few rounds. And it's just really hard for me to, my brain is wired to look for value. And so I can't pass that up.
Yeah, and I like to make my own season long projections, so I'll have those posted for free in the Discord for Occupy Fantasy subscribers. And there are definitely some spots on the board I hope to discuss here on this show where I'm kind of above the field on some of these guys and well below the field on some of these guys, depending on their ADP. I've done a couple of drafts. I haven't had a fourth pick just yet, so this will definitely be a little bit of a different look at the board for me. So we're going to get some fresh opinions here on this one. No surprise to see Saquon go number one overall here after the big season he had. I think this is kind of a fairly chalky start. It's going to be either Saquon or Jamar Chase number one in most drafts, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's how it should go. And, we've seen Jamar Chase go as late as maybe the fifth pick overall, which is kind of insane to me. If he's there at number 2 or 3, I'm just going to take him every time. But, I like your pick. I like what you went with here.
Yeah, I don't know how many. This is obviously a 150 max entry contest. I don't know if I'm going to fully max this one out because I, like you, I do like to play those smaller contests, those single entry contests that are going to be posted throughout the rest of the summer. Some of the higher dollar stuff with less contestants because that gives us, I think, a little bit of a better chance to have some success. That being said, I am going to look at my projections and try to get the most exposure to my favorite plays. And right now for the 2025 season, Chuck, Puka Nacua is my number one receiver. That's just across the board in terms of PPR rankings. So obviously I like him here in the first round. I definitely will probably go with ADP once I build out more teams and grab some of these other guys like Jefferson and Lamb and Amon Ra, but I'm happy to get Puka here for my first official show of the year.
And some of you might be new to the channel wondering why should we listen to these guys? Well, Chris Rooney, aka CDR02989, our football manager, NFL manager over here at Occupy Fantasy, also playoff best ball champion. He won first place in a playoff NFL contest last season. So I'd like to think he knows what he's doing.
I'm looking forward, honestly. I mean, I don't want to wish life away or wish the season away, Chuck, but I am looking forward to the upcoming playoffs as well because it's a completely different type of best ball game. And obviously, having some previous success, I love playing it. But don't sell yourself short, my friend, because this is a difficult achievement. 33rd place out of 1.1 million users, I believe in the 2023 DraftKings flagship contest. So kudos to you as well. Obviously, the biggest thing that we want to do is set ourselves up to have success, and we have to get into that week 17 round to do that. And obviously, you did that and had some really good success that year.
Yeah, and you mentioned what kind of structure I'm going for. I mean, the structure that worked that year, and it's going to work every year, is I had powerhouse receivers. I hit on the backup running backs who maybe weren't projected to go that high, preseason, and then just all the luck came together in the right weeks.
Speaking of how the board comes together, once Achan is off the board, I don't like these second, third round running backs really. I don't have a good feel for running backs right now, Chuck. So I'm kind of leaning towards our typical strategy you and I have talked about in the past on this channel. And it's not just us, others have discussed as well. Kind of hero or zero RB and just looking for value later in the board. I kind of into these receivers that you can still draft here. Looking at playoff weeks for the Rams, we have the Falcons, the Seahawks, and the Lions. I don't think I'm going to really go with any of those. I'm probably just going to take T. Higgins here with the Bengals, the best number two receiver in the league, and just continue to build out my receiver portfolio at the top of the board. Because I do think once you get to the middle of the draft, we see a shift in how players are drafting these positions. And we also see a dramatic drop off in talent at the wide receiver position, much more so, I think anyway, than the other positions.
Yeah, you kind of see the field reacting to last year really hard. Now, 2 seasons ago, if you watched our best ball shows, I kind of talked about I like taking early running backs, and It didn't work out that year. Zero RB was king because a lot of the early running backs got hurt, underperformed, whatever it is. Last year, that wasn't the case. The early running backs mostly all crushed. Saquon, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and I wasn't that into him. But this year, we see the field just go so hard on these early running backs. I mean, 9 went in the first 2 rounds, and I completely agree with Chris that the wide receiver fall off is pretty dramatic. And so I really think you got to get 2 to 3 wide receivers in the first 5, 6 rounds. Still get your early running backs because it looks kind of gross if you don't draft a couple early. But I think this is the way to go.
I could go with Chase Brown here and lock down kind of some Cincinnati scoring at multiple positions. And I think that in best ball, that's something that we have to kind of lay out and discuss a little further. But what I'm looking at here, Chuck, is actually getting my first finals correlation. I like Trey McBride with T. Higgins in championship week because they are playing in week 17. So now I've set myself up for a little Cincinnati Arizona stack in the finals if we're fortunate enough to get there. And obviously that means I should be interested in one of Kyler Murray or Joe Burrow as a quarterback as well at this point.
So going for the elite tight end, what is that? We had a tight end go at 13th overall. You took the second one off the board, but I like that. I'm generally going to lean towards taking later tight ends because the tight ends that go in rounds 18, 19, 20, I think are just so much stronger than the other positions. But the advantage of having the elite tight end is in those playoff weeks, you have one player who can just, put up a monster score.
I also think with just the extra roster spots over here on DraftKings, where we're drafting 20 rounds, I think it just affords us a little bit more ability to be a little bit more aggressive at quarterback and tight end. I think I kind of feel like typically when I only have 18 rounds, I'm drafting 2 quarterbacks, I'm drafting 2 tight ends. But here, Chuck, I think I want to stack 3 quarterbacks. And I think I want an elite tight end because I think I'm going to go for 3 tight ends instead of 2 tight ends.
Yeah, and I think that is I mean, that's what most people are drafting, right? 3 quarterbacks, 6 to 7 running backs, 7 to 8 wide receivers, and then 2 to 4 tight ends. I kind of lean towards more tight ends if I'm taking them towards the end, but since you got an elite guy, we don't have to spend as much draft capital. Are we?
Especially these target monsters in PPR formats, right? Like a Trey
Mhm.
McBride,
Yeah.
obviously Bowers. Um, I know he's getting a little age related decline is certainly a thing, but we got a lot of value, I think, with Travis Kelsey still where he's going. We'll see where he lands in this contest, Chuck. There's a lot of ways I think we can get some elite tight ends in our lineups this year. So I'm kind of interested in that.
And that's one of the things that I love this year's drafting this year because I think there's a lot more uncertainty than there have been in past years. Travis Kelsey, guys like Cooper Cup, other guys in different situations, the running back uncertainty with a bunch of teams. And so if you can go in there and, you know, uh, find your guys, be confident in it, then you can give yourself a good advantage.
All right. Got to think about what I want to do here. I guess while I think about my pick, we've kind of touched on it briefly, but how do you use ADP specifically to make pick decisions? It might seem like a super basic question, but since this is our first show of the year, I think it's probably a good thing to cover really quickly here.
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier, but on DraftKings, you're just going to find some crazy fallers, and I just can't help myself but take up those guys at value because something about combinations. A lot of players won't be able to have Jamar Chase with whoever goes 15th overall, but if they fall 9 picks, it's just I can't not take them, and so that's what I want to do. I want to get value. I'm hoping to draft guys later than their closing ADP at the end of the summer, but most of the time we are going to hit, but we're going to be wrong on a few guys too. Injuries happen, maybe a trade, situations change, but we'll be on the right side of that more often than not.
Went with the elite quarterback here. I actually have Jalen Hurts projected as my top quarterback this season. Not hard to do when we see the tush push has not been banned, and there's still a lot of rushing touchdown upside there for him. And probably one of the only quarterbacks that I'm willing to get, even if I don't have AJ Brown or Devontae Smith. Hopefully, you can get one of them, of course. But I think a lineup with a T Higgins in that spot right there, I think more people are going to take Joe Burrow for the correlation. So I'm trying to build a little bit more of a unique combination of players out as well, which is, I think, something we will dive into a little bit more on a future show. But that is something that you and I know, have always been mindful of when we're drafting.
Absolutely, yeah. And what do you think about Jalen Hurts being the fourth quarterback off the board?
I, it seems a little wild to me.
Yeah.
That said, it's kind of hard to quibble with who's going ahead of him. These are
Mhm.
all elite guys. I think I would draw the line there at Hurts, though. Once Burrow goes, of those four guys, talking about Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, and of course Hurts, at least we have the mobility there. Burrow, we're just kind of looking for that passing upside. I think obviously I'm into Cincinnati this year, but from a straight up quarterback fantasy point scoring perspective, I like being able to get there multiple ways, and Burrow just doesn't really offer that.
Burrow's one of those guys I see probably posted about the most because you see guys trying to stack Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and then they might push Burrow an extra round, and then they'll see someone take Burrow without having one of the top receivers and get upset about it. And so, what do you think about ensuring that you get that, double stack with the quarterback? I'll let you make your pick first.
Yeah, we're gonna go with Ken Walker because I need a run. Well, I haven't taken a running back yet, and he's kind of my favorite one left. And I get some correlation here with the Rams in Week 16, so certainly okay with that. So okay, you were asking me what's the importance of making sure I get that double stack with those passing quarterbacks. Um, I think especially with the quarterbacks that have receivers that don't have super high ADPs, it's like almost a must. With Cincinnati, I think Burrow's probably obviously we want the double stack, but I do think we still have some outs. We don't necessarily need to get Chase and Higgins with him. That's going to be pretty expensive, right? We can still get Josevac. We can get Mike Gesicki at tight end. We can even look at Chase Brown and maybe some of those backup wide receivers and running backs for some real late round upside if there's some shifts in playing time, which we know happens every year in the NFL. So gives us the most opportunity to have exposure to upside if and when Burrow and Cincinnati or any of these other teams have success. We definitely want to make sure we have a couple of teammates. So Hurts an exception to that. That said, there's still an opportunity for me to maybe consider his tight end if I want that. But if we look at some of the quarterbacks that are going to be drafted shortly here, just to have a little bit more of an intelligent conversation, absolutely want to go out of my way to double stack Mahomes, Mayfield,
Mhm.
uh, Knicks, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, kind of any way that I can. What do you think about that?
Oh, I love it. And it's interesting because a few of those guys you mentioned, so Joe Burrow, his top two receivers go way before he gets drafted, right? But a couple of those guys you mentioned, we can still backstack with a
Mm-hmm.
couple of their receivers after we take the quarterback. And so we don't already have to have that decision made. And then on that tight end note, I'm a big advocate of always taking the tight end for your quarterback if
Mm-hmm.
it's as long as you're not reaching too far in ADP. But I think it's correct.
And the tight end ADPs are kind of favorable this year, Chuck. Outside of these, we're
Hmm.
arguing with the ADP on these elite guys, but if you, in terms of on your last point there, making sure you can pair them with your quarterbacks. I mean, Travis Kelsey's ADP on DraftKings right now is 78, uh,
Hmm.
slightly below Mahomes. It's going to be a little tough, I think, to get those guys without reaching for one of them, but still doable. Uh, with Lamar Jackson, you've got Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely both going after pick 100. You have Dalton Kincaid going 136th with Buffalo. And I'm sure we have Dawson Knox going significantly later than that. So there's options at that position to make sure we have your stacks down.
Yeah, and you mentioned Dalton Kincaid. I'm thinking guys like Kyle Pitts who maybe underperformed based on their expectations, but we're still drafting them. We're still going to take shots. They're still young. They have the opportunity, so we're not giving up on those guys just yet. Because if they hit, it's so powerful.
And you bring up something, or you're alluding to something that I'm always mindful of. We come off of seasons where players play well or they don't play well, and it affects their perception going into the following season. That obviously seems like it might be super basic analysis, but in a large tournament like this, it does give us an opportunity to draft players kind of at their floor and hope for a rebound
Hmm.
performance. And I think that's one of my favorite things to do because
Yep.
there are players on the board here, Chuck, that we know are good players. We've seen them perform before. They've been drafted near the top of draft boards in recent seasons. It's not like we're going back 4 or 5 years. We may be going back just to 2024. So I like to kind of look at those guys and see if we can buy into that bounce back before the rest of the field catches on to it and their ADP rises before we get right up into September. Basically, looking for that closing line value early already, trying to figure out who some of those players are going to be. I think there's plenty of those opportunities here.
Yeah, the example I always use would have been my first or second year playing best ball. Debo Samuel was coming off a major injury and he was going very late. And my data suggested that he was a major value pick. I took the risk and he dominated that season, really helped me advance a lot of teams. So we're going to be looking for those guys this year, and I think there's a lot more than there's been in previous seasons.
Speaking of guys coming off major injury, there's one of them. Chris Godwin was off to a monster start last year. Got knocked out in October for the rest of the year, and I mean he was their number one receiver. He was outperforming Mike Evans. I think it's certainly in the sixth round. That is a risk well worth taking.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm trying to reorient myself. Look at what I need here. I still have a lot of interest, I think, in Matthew Stafford, having taken Puka in the first round. So why am I talking about that at this second? David Montgomery is sitting right here. I've been a David Montgomery guy for the last couple of years. I think we expect Detroit to continue to be good this season. I don't see much of a threat to Montgomery's established kind of RB1B role here. I know we have a lot of positive coach speak about Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think the Lions are at their best, Chuck, when they continue to use these two guys the way they've been using them over the last couple of years. Once again, being able to get Montgomery in the closer to the middle of the draft on one of the better teams in the NFL, I'm fine with that as a running back pick.
And this might be a pretty basic piece of information, but we like players from good teams that are expected to score more touchdowns. Just higher scoring means more fantasy points, means better for us. So
And I like both of those receivers that just went right after me. I think they're two of the better values on the board in general at the position at this point. Jacoby Myers and Jerry Jeudy. I know for a fact I'm going to be well overweight on those players this year.
I have Jacoby Myers top 12 at his position.
So Caleb Johnson here at running back. Same owner took Travis Hunter the round before that. We saw RJ Harvey go from the Denver Broncos go a little earlier in the sixth round. I think on our next show, we'll probably have more of an intelligent discussion, a more detailed discussion about these rookie players. But at this early juncture, because like me, you're just getting started with your drafts here. How do you feel about some of these new players in the NFL? And do you have any favorites, any diamonds in the rough that we should be focusing on?
Not quite yet, but I do like drafting rookies in general. They tend to overperform ADP. They tend to come on in the second half of the season, which is perfect for the playoff weeks. And so there's something about drafting, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 rookies on as many teams as you can, and I think it's probably not going to let you down that often. And when it hits pretty hard.
What do you think about Cooper Cup on the Seahawks this year? That was definitely a one of those jaw dropping kind of moments for me from this free agency period. The whole Devontae Adams going to LA and the Rams just kind of deciding they're all done with Cup. Big reason why they got that Super Bowl championship a few years back here, Chuck. Seems like a major shift for both those teams, really, the Seahawks and the Rams.
Well, this is a Cooper Cup's like I think the perfect example of a player who underperformed, and so everyone is off of him. But now he's going so late, and I don't think this is a terrible situation in Seattle. Sam Darnold showed us that he was pretty good last season. There's another bona fide stud in a wide receiver, Jackson Smith and Jigba, on the other side of the field. So I don't see any reason why Cooper Cup can't at least outperform his ADP. I don't think we're going to expect him to get back to his, wide receiver one triple crown status, but I do like him at ADP.
Yeah, I think it's a spot where I'll have to rely on the film nerds a little bit to tell me how JSN will help Cup have success this year. But you got two great receivers out there. Definitely is going to make it hard for defenses to completely take either one away, which is always a good thing for fantasy football. Get the guys into some single coverage and have a chance to beat one defender and post a big number in just a handful of plays. That's definitely what we're looking for. The reason I took him there, though, because I'm still trying to get at a stack with Puka Nakua. I could get a stack with Sam Darnold, though, now that I have Ken Walker and Cooper Cup. Unlike daily fantasy, which you and I both love playing daily fantasy here on DraftKings as well, where we talk about game stacking and we look at game stacking a quarterback with either one or two pass catchers, typically in that type of contest in a season long format. We actually really like pairing running back with the quarterback and one of those receivers a whole lot more, right? Because we're getting exposure to the offense and we're
Mhm.
looking for that offense to be elite, right? That's kind of the best way to look at that.
Yeah, and I mentioned, you generally want to take players from good teams, but there's always a team every year that surprises us. So, Tampa Bay, I think, was a pretty decent example from the last couple seasons. But if you can find that team where the players are all just going late, you think that their values, I think you should lean into it.
I mean, it's a little sticker shock in the reverse way to see Kelsey going at this point in a draft. And then obviously Stephon Diggs coming off of a brutal injury late in the season for Houston seems pretty good to be able to take a little bit of a flyer on the most likely top receiver for his team, the New England Patriots here.
Yeah, I mean, Stephon Diggs specifically, he has the opportunity to just smash his ADP. And then I was going to ask you, so he had some stuff going on off the field. We all know what happened, but then there was some video of him performing pretty well on the field. He looked great considering the injury he's coming off of. How much do you weigh that into your process this early in the offseason?
It's just good to see him out on the field making those cuts. It's hard to really glean anything until we see actual training camp news. We see how they're treating players in the preseason. It's something that we have talked about for years here at Occupy. We actually love preseason football. Coming off an injury, we want to see Diggs have kind of clean reports, clean status. We want to see that he's participating in those training camp practices. It's kind of become a thing here with the popularity of fantasy football that we get training camp stats for every team. So I want to see Diggs out there, having full reps with Drake May in practice in July. So as long as we get all of that, then I think we should be all over a player, obviously him, but also players like him in similar situations. There's a lot of guys. Another one just came off the board in Brandon Ayuk that are going to
Mhm.
be in similar spots that had major injuries that are trying to come back here, hopefully for the start of the season.
Yeah, and on the other side of that, I saw a video of Debo Samuel, and he did not look very fast. Are you docking him for that pretty hard?
Not yet. I mean, it's early, right? He can definitely play his way into shape here
Hmm.
in camp. So definitely kind of an anecdotal, qualitative thing I will keep in mind if I'm debating one player versus another. But I'm not worried about Debo at this time. I guess I'll just go with Kyler here since I took Trey McBride and we like pairing tight ends with their quarterbacks. So I know that'll make Brian happy because he absolutely loves the Arizona Cardinals in fantasy football.
And so you have basically two elite quarterbacks. Kyler's is still elite in my opinion. Are you done at quarterback?
No,
Okay.
that was a pretty quick no, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think with the extra couple of rounds that we have available, it just makes
Mhm.
it pretty easy to get three quarterbacks. And you'll see now that we're in the eighth round, quarterbacks are going to fly right here. So this is actually, if you're going to prioritize getting two or three quarterbacks, this is a little bit different than the other site. I would make sure I'm looking for my second quarterback around this time because they're all going to be gone very, very quickly. And you're going to be looking at some of these, I'll just call them sketchy quarterback situations. We try very hard, I think, when we're drafting these contests, since we can't change our lineups at all after we're done drafting, to get guys that are still going to be playing at the end of the season. Because obviously we want to have as many shots at generating fantasy points in our lineups as possible to have a chance to win. And I don't want to be drafting into some of these sketchy quarterback rooms like the Cleveland Browns, like the New Orleans Saints, right? We want to make sure we feel pretty good about what we have.
So with your two elite quarterbacks, are you more willing to take a risk on maybe Anthony Richardson, who are not sure is going to start?
That's a good question. Player that has a ceiling,
Mhm.
like Richardson, first round draft capital for Indianapolis. I think that makes sense for sure. The players that I'm just super out on are Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Spencer Rattler,
Yeah.
uh, any of those guys from those teams. I just don't want any part of that right now at this point. All right. So, how do we feel about the Moon Man, Darnell Mooney, really secondary Atlanta wide receivers behind Drake London? I have an investment in that here with uh, kind of making it known on this show that I'm trying to get all those stacks with the Rams. So taking him here gives me that. I now have a player in each round to correlate with Puka Nakua. And obviously, that's the biggest reason why I'm still going to be looking at a third quarterback in this draft check. I really want to get Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, and on Darnell Mooney, I think Michael Penix is good. Mooney should be the wide receiver too. So I would feel pretty good about taking him there.
All right. You have reassured me. That is good news to hear for sure. What in your mind, mid June, like are your firm? Obviously, we should be willing to change our minds on things, but do you have some firm takes that you want to share that might not necessarily be super popular at this point? They could be player takes, they could be strategy takes, But here in 2025, what are kind of some of the things that you've thought about doing or you're already doing that you think are going to give us a chance to be successful?
I don't know, I think it's just kind of what I talked about earlier. Really get a couple of elite wide receivers early, whether or not you take a few or a couple, I guess, elite running backs. But I think there's value in late quarterback and value in late tight end. And so that's something I'm going to focus on a bit. I still want to get my elite guys, top of the position, but I just think there's so much to like at the end of the draft. I will say maybe around ADP 150, there's a section of guys that I'm just not interested in, but then there's a lot of guys going undrafted that I think could return some value, especially with the 20 rounds.
This is a good part of the draft. Again, I only have two running backs at this point. I went with Walker and Montgomery in rounds 5 and 6. This is where I really start looking at those ambiguous running back situations and looking at one that stands out to me that I guess I'm a few picks away from really kind of worrying about at this point is that Tampa Bay backfield, Chuck.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
ADP for I get it. He looked great last year. I'm a fan of his. I'm not saying that I don't like him. I don't like his cost right now. Bucky Irving,
Hmm.
late second, early third round, versus Rashad White. If they're going to, be RB1A, 1B, kind of like your, I guess your store brand Detroit Lions backfield here. I still like Rashad White here, and I don't understand why he's going around pick 140 if they're going to be that close in usage. I guess the skeptics for White and the bulls for Bucky Irving would tell me that I'm wrong that they're going to be splitting work. But I guess that's what my thesis is here. They're going to be splitting work, and I don't see how this ADP makes sense.
I think this is a perfect example because I tend to lean towards the cheaper guy. And in this case, Bucky is going a little bit higher than I think he should go, and Rashad White is going far lower than I think he should go. And it's not just their situation to start the season. Imagine Bucky Irving takes a hit, he gets injured. Rashad White still isn't going to pick up all of the work. They still have Sean Tucker on the roster, right? And so I don't know if we're considering Sean Tucker in the late rounds, but it's just the value of these backup running backs. And that's what zero RB is, kind of taking less running backs early in the draft and taking more later in the draft with the, you know, hope that maybe they get more work than expected.
Yeah. And, player I just drafted here, I think Ramondre Stevenson is another example of that. People are excited about the shiny new toy and Travion Henderson out of Ohio State, as they should be. But I do think Stevenson's still going to have a pretty solid role in this offense.
I agree. Yeah, and I think that's a perfect example of a, zero RB guy who we're not super comfortable with him, but if he can contribute a bit, then that would be great.
Um, he went at the end of the ninth round, but I do like Travis Etienne Jr. I think
Mhm.
certainly he's another player we've seen handle the volume. I like Najee Harris. Obviously, he has to compete with Hampton, the Chargers rookie draft pick. But a lot of upside. We know running back is the one position where a player can slide into a 2025 plus touch role, and it just completely changes their outlook. And we get we have to think about these players that way, right? We get them at one price, and if they end up with that much more enticing role, then they're a huge hit, and it's probably the player that you need to advance and to win if that ends up happening this year.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons that works when you're taking the elite wide receivers early is just I think that's the best combination. You hit on that stud wide receiver, and then you get the running back who overperforms, and you have such a strong team, especially going into the playoffs.
CJ Stroud has had quite a drop compared to the last couple of, or compared to last season in particular. He was a super early pick. I think he was that fourth or fifth quarterback off the board after the big
Yeah,
four, if you will, last year. How do you feel about Houston this year?
I mean, I'm pretty sure we were pretty off of CJ Stroud due to how high he was going last year, but now he's going too low. I'm going to take shots. He showed us that he can perform in this league, and he's going to be down Tank Dell for most of the season, I think, but still has enough weapons there that I'm not too worried about it, and I think he is a value where he's going.
Especially here on DraftKings, it's hard for me to get away from David Njoku, even
Mhm.
with how sketchy Cleveland's offense seems right now. And obviously, they drafted a rookie tight end who was like a complete stud, by the way, as
Mhm.
well, and Harold Fannin Jr. out of Bowling Green. But regardless of who's under center, Cleveland is a team that I think they're projected to be one of the worst teams in the league as far as expected wins this year, Chuck. That speaks well from a fantasy football standpoint to trailing game scripts to Cleveland throwing the football his way early and often in these games. So I'm happy to get him in the mid rounds and kind of treat him as, I guess, almost the floor for this elite tight end position alongside. I mean, there are a couple guys down here that I just don't understand their ADPs, frankly. There's another one
Yeah.
coming up that I have I guess a real enticing reason to consider in Dallas Goddard as well. Njoku and Goddard probably two guys I'm going to be pretty invested in this year as a result.
I mean, starting at Njoku, the rookie Loveland, Tucker Kraft, Isaiah Likely, Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goddard, Jake Ferguson, Zach Ertz. Like, I think that group of tight ends is so strong. You take three or four of them, maybe two from that group and a couple later, but I just think when it works so well.
The Miami Dolphins are another team that I think kind of fits that mold I was just discussing of looking at getting some of these high ceiling players at their floors. Just a huge issue with injuries last year, not just for Tua, but for some of the receivers, Waddle and Tyreek Hill. What do you think about the Dolphins, Chuck? Because I'm curious if you share my opinion here. I think this is worth considering this year. Miami being they're going to be able to outperform this ADP. I think.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of burned everyone last year. The only player who really got there was Jonnu Smith. You can make the argument for Devin Achane, I guess, but it's another team that's probably going too late, and I see value, so I want to take those guys. And, it's a little weird because Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, injury, whatever. What if they don't get hurt? They're probably going to smash ADP.
I was hoping Rashad White would make it back to me. That was probably a little too optimistic. Gonna miss out on Dallas Goddard. That's quite all right. I'm gonna take Matthew Stafford. Now I've got my three quarterbacks, and I don't know if I'm gonna have anyone specific that I want to pair with Jalen Hurts here today, but that's okay. We know a big reason why we're interested in Hurts is because of what he can do of his own accord. So that can work out for sure and be a little bit different than everybody else that drafts Jalen Hurts, which is something that we need to consider in these types of contests.
Yeah, I mean, what's the path there? It's pretty straightforward. Jalen Hurts rushes in 3 touchdowns in Week 17.
And none of his teammates like Saquon, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith get there. That would definitely set us up for sure. And some of those other receivers, maybe one of our other game stacks goes off, but Hurts is the highest scoring quarterback.
Yeah.
So, I have Puka Nacua and Darnell Mooney. They have big games in Week 17, and you need Hurts. That's the kind of stuff to consider in this format.
And there's another guy who maybe he went off the board already, Jalen Wright, going back to Miami. What do you think about that situation? Because I think that's one of the wider running back one to running back two, like, the difference in how the field is viewing him. And he performed poorly last year. We thought he was a good candidate, but I'm going right back to him. I've heard good things about him, and I'm willing to take that risk on Jalen Wright.
They cleared the deck for him, right? Raheem Mostert out, Jeff Wilson Jr. out. So there's really nobody else that's a legitimate threat, I think, to his opportunity behind Devin Achane. And then at the same time, anything happens to Achane, he's a complete smash at this ADP. There's a lot of running backs in this scenario that we're going to discuss pretty much every single show that we do this year. And he's definitely one of them that I want to have exposure to in an offense that we expect to be good because, again, superficial to some degree. We want players on good teams, and I think we still feel like Miami is a good offense. So have no problem considering him whatsoever. Speaking of running backs that have opportunities for upside on good teams, how about Ray Davis with the Buffalo Bills? Anything happens with James Cook, a little bit of regression maybe for James Cook this year coming, Chuck. He scored a ton of rushing touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
Just that alone, if those scores go different ways, look, it happens with running backs. They get tired. They get down to the goal line. There's a substitution. Maybe Ray Davis punches in some touchdowns. Maybe he ends up being the goal line back. Maybe he ends up being the starter at some point if, God forbid, anything happens to Cook. I like taking players like this on good offenses at this point in drafts.
And referencing the Occupy Fantasy DraftKings NFL Best Ball ADP tracker, Ray Davis opened at 158. We'll call it pick 159. He's going around 144 now, so he's jumped up over a full round. I don't really think it's that much. Like, it's not going to change my decision on whether I draft him or not, since we're already pretty late in the draft. If
Mhm.
he is a good pick there, then that's fine. But going back to what we were talking about with Tampa Bay and Rashad White and Sean Tucker, so you're interested in Ray Davis. What about Ty Johnson?
It's a thought. Anyone in that kind of situation is someone that I'm looking at. The other team that I'm going to just move right away from that because I had something else on my mind. Talked about Raheem Mostert leaving Miami. What do
Mhm.
you think about these backups to Ashton Gianti with the Raiders? Obviously, the shiny new toy in fantasy football, going right into the first round as a rookie, coming off of his illustrious career at Boise State. We've got Zamir White. We've got Raheem Mostert there. Should we have interest in these guys at the end of drafts? I think we should because the upside is massive.
Yep, I think that's all it is. Just but let's say Ginty stays healthy. What value do you see Mostert or Zamir White having?
I think the value is in trying to think of the right way to say this so it doesn't come across as too dismissive to the player. I think the value is solely in the upside and the opportunity that exists if there's a shift in the availability of Gianti. Obviously, we're not rooting for anybody to get hurt, but when we look at the players that are available to us at the end of drafts, there's significant risk as far as fantasy football is concerned. We're drafting
Mhm.
guys that aren't necessarily starters in their offenses, or their playing time situation isn't necessarily secure. Uh, they're probably not going to be scoring enough points to be in our lineups most weeks anyway, right? So we want to try to swing for the fences, so to speak, try to hit home runs with these picks because if we're right, when we're right, the upside is well worth the risk that we took on that player. We know they're probably going to score 0 points in the majority of weeks, but if there's a shift in their playing time, they could be the difference between uh, not winning at all and us being at the top of the leaderboard and taking that DraftKings crown this year.
I'm glad you mentioned something about that. A lot of these guys that we're taking, even in maybe the mid rounds, they might be a zero or they might not contribute to our roster on most weeks. But a lot of these guys, for me, if they have that spike week potential, they have the potential to put up, 20 plus, 25, 30 plus fantasy points. If it only happens in one game for a guy like Mostert or Zamir White, I think that's enough for them to fulfill their value, exceed value even. Just one good game is all it takes.
I've gotten away from the receivers a little bit here in this
Mhm.
draft. So I'm probably going to look at the best of what is left at this point. And we like players on good teams, but there are a lot of
Me too.
players left from the teams that people don't expect to be good. And they're players that have tremendous playing time, target volume, upside. One of them being Wandale Robinson with the Giants. Obviously, everyone loves Malik Neighbors. That's why he's a fringe first, early second round pick in most drafts this year. But really, at this point, if you're looking for that volume and that upside, we want to make sure we're looking at some of these guys that have passed to leading their team in targets, or at least seeing a significant amount of opportunities, like 100 plus targets in their offenses at this point. And I still think we have a lot of those guys left.
Yeah, and then there's a few guys in this range who, Cedric Tillman, Alec Pierce, Quentin Johnston, that I'm big fans of, and it's really hard not to just click on them all the time if I need help at wide receiver. Even going later than that, Andre Yoshabas, who has immense contingent value. Guys like De'Ami Brown, even Darius Slayton. I mean, I feel like there's more late wide receivers this season than there has been in years past.
I think where we're at, we got 3 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 5 receivers, 2 tight ends. I mean, I think since we discussed him, I'm almost obligated to take Jalen Wright here, right? So we'll throw him onto the roster. I got 5 running backs here, and maybe I'll take a shot on one more guy, but we'll probably look at another tight end and receivers pretty much just to wrap this thing up here.
Nice.
All right. Really think I love our tools. I kind of want to jump back over to that a little bit. Um, so I searched for Jacoby Myers as the example earlier, but looking at the roster that I'm building here, and I am doing this live. Wandale Robinson, who I just the last receiver I took, We got the Raiders as a matchup for them in week 17. So I guess, this is definitely something that I don't think is going to be super popular at all. If we're looking at one of those backup Raider running backs, and for whatever reason, at some point later in the season, one of those guys ends up being the starter for them, I've got a mini game stack in the playoffs and championship week that I don't think really anybody else is going to have much exposure to if this is the team that gets there for me, right? So these are the types of upside opportunities that I'm looking at. Obviously, it's a little difficult to do when we're kind of talking strategy and recording a show. I know we do the majority of our drafts offline when we just have the comfort of our own thoughts in mid-June when we're thinking about NFL football. These are the types of things that I'm thinking about when I'm making my picks at this point. How do I correlate? How do I maximize upside of these players kind of going off if they all perform well together so I can realize the best possible result? Does that make
Nice.
sense to you?
Nice. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Cool. And a lot of contingent asymmetric upside with. I like Braylon Allen. I like Nick Chubb coming off of injury. I don't know how I feel about Rashawn Johnson. I'm just giving you gut takes at this point. I don't like Justice Hill, but I understand why people are taking these players at this point.
I like Justice Hill. Yeah,
Okay.
he's not a guy who's. I mean, he actually did have a pretty good spike week, but he's not a guy I expect to spike. Just maybe, I have a running back out or it's a bye week and he can help fill in the roster for a week or two.
Okay.
Or, if something happens to Derrick Henry, I don't think Justice Hill just takes over all the work though, and so I don't think he has as much upside as some other RB2s might. Yeah, Keaton
I was
Mitchell is
big on
still
I
over
was big
there.
on Johnson last year with Chicago. So again, this is an example of something we already talked about. He kind of burned me a little bit, so I'm just not thrilled to click on him. But the price is still pretty good, I guess.
I mean, I was on the other Chicago running back. I can't even think of his name. He was my highest drafted player last season. I think he contributed actually 0 points to all my teams all season. So, sometimes you're going to miss and it's going to hurt. But what if I was right? I would have been in a good spot.
How do you feel? I just see that person drafting right next to me here took him. The most recent, I think, big news for fantasy football this year: Aaron Rodgers going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Didn't
Hmm.
really look great with the Jets last year. What do we think the upside is here? What do we think the most likely outcome is? Is probably a better question.
How was Russell Wilson last season? I think that would be a win if he was as good as Russell Wilson. I do expect him to have higher fantasy scores in certain games, but I'm not really excited about him.
What do you think about Keenan Allen? What's going on there?
I like him. I like him because like I mentioned earlier, once he signs with a team, it almost doesn't matter what team he signs with. His ADP is going to rise, and he showed last year that he can still put up, those numbers. I mean, where's Adam Thielen going? He went 20, 30 picks ago, and we have Keenan
Mhm.
Allen, who is a better player, still available. I think he's great.
I just think on this at this point in the calendar, mid June, at this particular juncture, where I feel like I probably need a little more juice at receiver. I get it. He's getting older. He's not on a roster just yet, but we have confidence he will be on one. I think he gives me the opportunity at some ceiling here, so I'll definitely will take
Yep.
him.
Yep.
As far as we know, he's healthy, so that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and there's the other major free agent, and Amari Cooper. I'm not sure how the field looks at him. I guess negatively since he's going so late, but that's another guy I don't mind taking some shots to. It's hard for me to believe he fell off that hard in just half a season.
Mm-hmm. We were super big fans of him last year,
Yeah, we were.
and that didn't necessarily work out because of how sideways Cleveland's season went, and his usage was kind of disappointing with Buffalo, and I think that probably speaks to why he is where he is right now. Um, didn't really live up to what was expected of him after that trade with Buffalo. So, but definitely type of player that could plug into an offense and give them that upside outside the numbers, running deep routes downfield. We know we can hit that ceiling. Okay. So we got five running backs, six receivers, excuse me, with Keenan Allen, two tight ends. That's the build that we're currently on. I think just kind of best available player is all I'm really considering at this point. I'm not super worried about my floor at these positions, so I'm just kind of
Mhm.
looking at what is most interesting to me at this point, and maybe just trying to capitalize on whatever kind of news that has come out. I think this player is still on the board. He is. He's actually sitting right at the top. Calvin Austin is leader in the clubhouse for the second wide receiver job in Pittsburgh. I mean, I guess that's good for his target volume, his target floor, and we're in the 17th round. So I'll take Calvin Austin here.
Yeah, I mean, the competition for his spot is pretty thin. Robert Woods didn't realize he was still in the NFL.
But that's definitely like the value to be looking for at this point. It's not necessarily, the type of thing that's going to get you to jump out of bed and be like thrilled to have on your roster. But, you take the name out of it. If you have an opportunity for 100, 120 targets, there's going to be some scoring. There's going to be some spike weeks there that will help us out for sure.
Well, referencing the ADP tracker, I mean, DK Metcalf is going in the, what is that, the fourth round, and the next guy isn't going until Calvin Austin in the 17th. Maybe you consider Fryermuth. I think Fryermuth is a good pick. I think he'll be better with Aaron Rodgers than he was last year, but even he's going into 14th round. And just, what if the Steelers overperform? They're probably going to go 9-8 like they do every year, but what if?
Talk to me about sell me on these Rams tight ends. I know you're over in LA. That's kind of where you call home. We've got Tyler Higbee returning this year, who I think just based off of sheer habit is the first place my mind goes. But we got a rookie in the mix here that kind of goes around this ADP as well, Chuck. How are you feeling about your Rams in the tight end position right now?
Higbee feels like a safe pick that he's not going to be a zero, but I question, the true ceiling where Terrence Ferguson, I mean, I don't know much about him. My impression of him is that he's kind of a athletic freak. And so he has the opportunity to be what Higbee can't, but he also has the opportunity to be less. But I'll take the shot on the ceiling guy.
And I think on the next show, we're going to dive more into rookies in general. But the other rookie in your Rams' offense who just got drafted, Hunter at the running back position, how are you feeling about him? And then how are you feeling about the impact on Kyron Williams this year? Do you think he's still someone we can take early?
It's going to be hard for me to ever not be a fan of Kyron Williams. So I'm still going to be taking him. If I can get him a few picks past ADP, that's even better. As for Hunter, the rookie, I don't know that I'm that interested unless I hear some definitive news out of camp or some coach speak from McVay. But Blake Corum, I mean, people are on him. People want to draft him. He's still going past pick 200 though. Just if Kyron goes down, I imagine Blake Corum would be the lead back, but I guess we'll
That's
have to
kind
see.
of what I have been thinking as well. But I'm going to have to dive into more of the news here to feel good about that. All right. What can we close out the show with here? I guess we talked about it a little bit before I started the draft, but critical throughout the whole draft season here is to look at contest selection. I know it's a big thing we always talk about here in Occupy Fantasy. I was hoping to get Ferguson. Oh well. Why don't you talk to the people here, Chuck, a little bit about how to identify the best contests depending on their bankroll sizes and whatnot.
Yeah, and I mean, I imagine a lot of our viewers play DFS as well, so they have these decisions when they're entering the regular DFS contest. But, I think the millionaire contest is great. I love it. I've had success in it. I'm going to enter, as much as I can. But those $3 20 maxes, the $10 5 maxes, maybe they have a $12 3 max, the single entries. I think those are the contests you target first, and then you top off your best ball portfolio with the Millie Maker.
So we did it. I got my Wandale Robinson, Raheem Mostert mini stack. I'm on record that if that's the one that you need this year, I feel like I'm going to be one of the few people that has that. I mean, it's not hard to get. Obviously, I'm being a little hyperbolic here, but trying to think a little bit more intelligently about our picks. Another team that I didn't really think I had much of a reason to take. I just kind of let the value fall to me in Calvin Austin. We look at Pittsburgh. They've got the Cleveland Browns in week 17. They've got the Detroit Lions in week 16, and they have the Miami Dolphins in week 15. So kind of inadvertently correlated with some of the other players I already took in Jalen Wright, David Njoku. So that was kind of David Montgomery. So that was kind of a serendipity in my favor there. So that's a good thing.
Nice. And then one thing I want to mention, so we talked about contest selection just on DraftKings. There's other sites that have best ball, but I'm going to be playing mostly just on DK this year. I think the contests are just better than everywhere else, and I like drafting on there a lot more. So I will be mostly just on DraftKings for this season.
Yeah, we're super grateful to be partnered with DraftKings this year. That's the bottom line. I think I'm going to be playing most of my exposure on DraftKings this year. because of how good the product is, primarily, Chuck. I
Yeah.
mean, the draft board uh, is one of the better ones that is available. The scoring, the PPR format, is my favorite way to play fantasy football. So the fact that DraftKings is kind of going all in on best ball now, I couldn't be happier about it.
And we mentioned that you draft your first contest, they'll give you another ticket to draft a second contest. Check the promotions tab throughout the day if you're already playing DFS and other sports, because they'll sometimes have flash promotions where, get a ticket for doing this or get a ticket for doing this. And I think those are just great. Just the added value is amazing.
I think I just auto picked, but that's all right because I don't feel great about whatever was here.
Who'd we get?
Jalen Coker, or I'm
Oh,
sorry, we got your roommate's going to be happy. Alec Ao Manor. I don't even know if I'm saying that correctly. That's how out of pocket I am on Titans rookies this year. But hey, we want upside, right? And we're going to talk about those rookies a lot next week. Brian, if you're watching this, my homework for next show is to have all the takes on Ao Manor here, and I definitely will bring those to the table. All right.
yeah. Chris mentioned, so my roommate's a huge Titans fan. And if you listen to Titans fans, Cam Ward is the QB1. Aya Manor is going to finish top 12 at his position. So we'll get more into the rookies in the next video, though. That's going to be the theme of getting into.
When you, I guess, we'll bring this home, right? It's the end of the draft, so there's not really a ton of risk here in the 19th round. But when you do end up auto picking in the fast draft, you know, does that, obviously it's frustrating. And I'm a little frustrated by it because I was looking for a specific player. That's fine. But when you're in those spots, because it happens to all of us, how do you, I guess, kind of stay motivated to kind of still draft the best team? Like, or do you feel like kind of deflated by that? Like, how do you handle it?
Uh, Hopefully, it's the position that I wanted to take. I mentioned, I think structure is a little bit more important than player takes right now. As long as you're drafting the right position at the right points in the draft, then I'm not too concerned about it. But I've definitely had some where, I auto a quarterback that I absolutely didn't need. And yeah, I'm minus a roster spot, but you're still in the draft. You got to try and salvage it, right? And so I try not to get too down about when that happens, because if you're drafting a lot, it's bound to happen a few times.
Yeah, an eighth receiver. I'm not really tremendously concerned about that. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially at least you got a guy who maybe has an upside.
I was going to ask you before that happened, who are some of your favorite wide receiver opportunities at this point? Because obviously it is kind of slim pickings.
Yeah.
Naturally, you're drafting like 230th player in a contest. I think there are guys, there are names that we have seen here, like veterans that we could certainly consider that have upside. But I almost kind of lean towards um, the rookies a little bit because I am attracted to like the unknown commodity and the asymmetric upside there.
Yeah, and there's plenty of guys even past ADP 200. I mean, you took Io Manor, I think he's fine. Tyler Lockett, De'Ami Brown, Darius Slayton, Tobert, and that was just in order. Those are the next five receivers off the board. Dontavion Wicks has like a cult following, so that's kind of cool. Amari Cooper. I'm not sure what week Tank Dell is returning, but if we think that he could be back for the playoffs, then he could be worth a couple shots. Pretty risky though.
I kind of wanted a third tight end. I don't know if I'm going to force it just because I have Njoku, I have Trey McBride.
Hmm.
Maybe that's not the right thing to do here. Maybe I actually want a ninth wide receiver just because I feel kind of like after Mooney, I really have four receivers I feel good about: Nakua, Higgins, Cup, and Mooney. So for this particular build, I think I'm going to go for that ninth receiver.
Yeah, and I mean, like I just mentioned, I think there's a lot of guys. I mean, we have Christian Watson all the way down here. Is he supposed to come back this season?
I haven't seen recent news on him. Juju with Kansas City played well in the playoffs for them last year.
Yeah.
Cavante Turpin was a player I think people were getting super into before they traded for George Pickens. Tim Patrick's on the Lions now. He's played well in the past. We know he has a ceiling. He's coming off an injury. These are players that are all in very similar positions. Noah Brown, we've seen him play very well. Like I don't really have a favorite player here. Um, I'm going to go with Elijah Moore. This is like an
Okay.
air yard all star last year with Cleveland. now playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the league. That's how I'll wrap up this team and hope he has earned a little bit more of a role with the Buffalo Bills. Chuck, I know we've mentioned it several times here in this show, but we're going to have another video in a couple of days here on the channel. We're going to dive a little bit more into the rookies, how we'd like to incorporate them into our rosters. I didn't really draft too many of them today, so maybe on our next show we will get more into that, and obviously get more than just like, yeah, we like Ashton Gianti, because obviously everyone likes Ashton Gianti, but there are a lot of great players this year that I think are going to be helpful for us this season.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the I mean, I'm looking forward to the whole summer. This is going to be great. But, in the meantime, make sure you go to occupyfantasy.com. The tools are free that we've been showing, the Stack Seeker and the ADP Tracker. And then head over to the Discord. Send us some of the teams you've drafted. Give us some ideas, ask some questions for the next video. Instructions to join that are in the description below.
Yeah. Don't forget to draft on DraftKings, guys. We'll be sharing some of the results of our DraftKings drafts in our Best Ball channel, and I want to see some of yours as well. For Chuck, I am Chris. Guys, thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys. Thanks.